everybody. Welcome to another Timeout with Tackle What's Next. Really excited to be back here another week where we're going to talk to athletes and executives about how sports change the course of their lives and the lessons that they've learned in life outside of the game. I'm your host, Danielle Berman, and I am the founder and CEO of Tackle What's Next, where we help athletes create impact and find purpose in life after sports. Tonight we have an awesome guest joining us, Justin Brown. Justin is a professional speaker and life coach at Value Solutions. He formerly played wide receiver in the NFL. He played for the Steelers and the Bills. Unfortunately, suffered some season-ending and career-ending injuries during his career. And as a lot of athletes, he struggled with figuring out what was next. He really leaned on his community after battling some anxiety and depression, but he found this local business owner that he was able to connect with that helped him reframe his mindset and reclaim his identity beyond sports. And today, he's the president of Value Solutions. He's written and he's an author of the Dive Playbook, and he coaches and mentors student athletes, teaching them how to not let their craft or their passion define who they are as a person. I mean, I love it, and I can't wait to dive into this conversation. And I see Justin's here in the room with us. Gonna go ahead and bring him on screen. And thank you guys so much for being here for another time out. Hey, Justin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Danielle. Yourself?
Doing great. It's great to see you. Thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Been a long time since we met, since we last spoke.
Yes, I think the last time we saw in person was like pre-pandemic in DC, so it's been a while. So how have things been going? What's the last couple of years been like for you?
Man, pivot, adjustments, right? You know, a whole bunch of it, just like I'm sure you've been going through as well. But
yeah,
a lot of great stuff, right? Just finding more about myself, more about you know, family, more about, you know, everything going on, right? Constantly having to, you know, improve who you are and make adjustments. So it's been quite the past 2 years. I'll just say that. What about yourself?
It's a good way to summarize it. I like it. I like it. And I know we talked in our kind of intro of you that you've written a book about athlete career transition, the Dive Playbook, and you've worked now coaching student athletes. I want to talk about your experience as an athlete, and I want to start way back at the beginning here. Tell us about your sports experience as a kid. Do you remember the first sport you played, and what ultimately pushed you towards football?
Yeah, great question. So I was very active as a kid, right? Just growing up, you know, in a small town in Wilmington, Delaware, just really identifying myself as an athlete, you know, putting myself into, you know, my parents thankfully were able to put me into sports, karate, baseball, football, basketball. And I played, you know, all three sports pretty much all the way up until my junior year in high school. That's when I had to start making some decisions. Being recruited, you know, up to starting at my sophomore year, and then, you know, really having to focus really on one sport. And because that one sport was really football, and it was the only one really giving me full scholarship, right? Baseball was my first love, quiet as it's kept. And I ended up running track as well, and I played basketball as well until I got kicked off my sophomore year, which is a quiet story, and that due to academics. But that kind of got me in gear as well. So that plays into what I do and discuss as well. But we can get to that later. But yeah, football was the sport that pretty much chose me. And that's kind of how that took place, you know, in high school. And just, you know, like I said, it chose me, and it allowed me to get into a position to where I was able to go, you know, outside of high school and be able to go to Penn State. So like I said, grew up playing all three sports or four sports. But football was the one that was going to actually, you know, paying me the money, right? Paying me the money and allowing my parents not to actually have to pay that scholarship tuition. So thank you, it was able to work out that way.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like you enjoyed a lot of different sports and got a lot out of it. So are there skills, whether it was football or any of these other sports, that you are still using today that you learned on the field or on the court?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, the main skills that were being instilled in me since a young age was just the discipline. Discipline, you know, really always being about the team, being selfless. So I think that's one of the main factors and one of the main characteristics that allowed me to just excel at each and every level, just being selfless, you know, all the way going back from playing lineman when I was in Little League, when, you know, every parent and every coach has had their son trying to play all the skills position. And I was just the one kid that was, wanted to be in a position to just help my team. And so being one of the bigger guys on my team, even though I was probably one of the fastest, just being selfless. But that also was, I can even go back to, that being instilled to me from my parents, right? Being raised in the church, and being an usher, a junior usher, and being in a servant type of aspect. So going all the way back, just being a servant, being a team player, and at the same time being very disciplined, being structured, right? From, being a 5 or 6 year old kid and running around the neighborhood with trash bags because you had to, drop weight to be able to play in that game, right? And all the way to, staying after school and getting extra time before school, like I mentioned earlier, in high school, because I realized that my grades weren't up to par with that to be able to allow me to earn that scholarship. So having enough discipline to just, put away some of the things that, maybe my peers were doing at the time, and really just buckle down and to continue to just pursue the dreams that I had set out at a young age. So I think one of the main things is just that I carry over is just, being disciplined and being supportive, just being supportive of my teammates, even that I carry over into this day and what I do.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think, definitely discipline is a huge thing that you learn being an athlete. And I think that's a big skill that translates to all kinds of different fields, wherever you're trying to go. So I love that. And I love the team aspect. Obviously, that's huge as well. And you mentioned that, there are things that you've learned that now you instill in some of these student athletes you work with today. So tell us why you decided to create Value Solutions and why helping student athletes was really important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned a little bit earlier in your intro, I never planned to, be set, take a step back from my career than when I did. Right. But, because of that, because of the 3 season ending injuries, because I did have to go through my go-through moment, right, and trying to really, really reinvent myself and try to figure out, what skills I had and what were transferable skills and what connections that could I already leverage and what experiences could I leverage, right? A lot of the name, image, and likeness stuff is going on now, but 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it wasn't necessarily as big. Twitter was just kind of getting, a lot more familiar, a lot more, going a lot more, nationally and whatnot. But so just realizing that there were a lot of different things that I could have done or been more of outside of the field, court, or ice, that, it led me to really just help, more student athletes more student athletes and prepare them for the transition that I was going through and for some of the struggles that, you hear about every single day, right? Especially with a lot of mental health is being talked about now, but you hear about, how a lot of, whether it's high school athletes, whether it's collegiate athletes, right, whether it's professional athletes, right, they're still all going through their transition and they still have a lot of struggles with it. So after I was able to, like you mentioned earlier, speak to someone who was a mentor, already in business, own multiple businesses, and he was able to pull out pretty much like the greatness in me, right? And that's why I even tell, athletes to this day, sometimes you have to listen to somebody that can kind of see the talents and see what you have, the potential, even when you don't even see it yourself. So that's why I really just started Value Solutions 3 years ago, really just led me to help prepare student athletes, before that transition, and even prepare them for how to, excel off the field, court, or ice with, NIL coming out and, all the different opportunities that they can take advantage of. But as long as they're staying true to who they are and they have a phenomenal team, they know what type of businesses or what type of opportunities to take advantage of, they'll definitely be perfectly fine. So it's more so, like I said, going back to that servanthood mentality and making sure that I can provide, just as much as the game has been able to help me and God was able to allow the game to bless me. I want to be able to be a blessing for, the rest of the student athletes coming after me, as well as helping some of the athletes that are in transition right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that you don't have to necessarily be retired or graduated to start thinking about this stuff with NIL and all these things happening. You can start right now and you can start thinking about this. So I love that. And I want to know, what did you do, or maybe what did you wish you had done? Is there anything you feel like is important for athletes now, whether they're still playing, whether they're, in that transition period themselves? What is something that they should be thinking about and should be implementing right now?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is, I think no matter what level you're at, whether it's high school, junior high, high school, collegiate, or professional, you should definitely start to get involved with certain things that might be, little bit foreign to you, right? For in high school, it might be getting a part of a leadership committee, right? That's outside of football and just kind of, it works on different skills, maybe leadership skills or, speaking skills or getting involved with different clubs, right? At the collegiate level, it might be going to some of those meet and greets, right? Some of those meet and greets, those professional development, some of those type of, I forgot what another word they call them, like professional,
like networking events,
networking events, right?
Mm-hmm.
Career days and things like that, to where you have to physically go and represent yourself and, carry yourself in a manner to make yourself marketable, right? Because as athletes, a lot of times, and I want to say you have it handed to you, but you don't necessarily have to make yourself marketable outside of your sport. But then you start to realize, right? You start to realize that, out after you're done playing, that, wow, maybe I should have went to a few of those networking events. Maybe I should have rubbed shoulders with a few people, shook hands,
Mm-hmm.
and just had conversation, right? Collected a few business cards, and just take advantage of those opportunities. Because I think as athletes, especially when you're in, you're in the zone, right? You're in your career, and you feel as though you can't even focus on anything else outside of your sport, right? And rightfully so, because it's so competitive. Regardless of what sport you play, you still have to think outside of the box. You have to be a forward thinker, and just, get comfortable with doing things that are uncomfortable, doing things that are outside of your sport, because it's going to be those relationships, it's going to be those traits, those skill sets that you develop outside of your sport that's going to allow you to be able to leverage, any amount of success that you have on the field, court, or ice.
Yeah, that's a really great piece of advice that I think a lot of folks do have that reasoning of like, well, I don't have time and I have to focus. And you're right, they're not wrong. And like you said, it's about being forward thinking and saying, look, I know that I have, 95% of my time soaked up in what I'm doing now, but I need to use that 5%, right? Instead of maybe playing video games for 4 hours tonight, maybe I'll sneak over to that networking event or that career day and hand out some business cards and then go play video games, right? It's the sacrifices of, what's more important, and that can change. And I think that's important too, is this doesn't have to be like every minute of every day. And so I think you're right, like leveraging it while you have that access, because that's a great point. Once you have that former athlete title, it's not as enticing as I play for, I know, and I work for. It changes somehow, right? I don't know why, but it does.
It does. Yeah, that's for sure. Definitely.
And I was going to ask you too, you wrote a book called the Dive Playbook. So tell us what that's about. And does that kind of tie into the lessons that you're instilling in these young athletes now? Or is that just your experience? Like, give us a little rundown of what inspired you to write that and what you're hoping that will do.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Dive Playbook was pretty much the principles that I was able to kind of iron out, just going back off of what allowed me, right, as a student athlete to succeed, mainly really at the high school level, right? And it's really placated towards high school student athletes and coaches, right? There's definitely the same principles you can build off of, honestly, whether collegiate or professional, or even in a different field. But it was really just some of the stories, some of the experiences that I had that started off, with me really being asked that question, right? About, by one of the top, wide receivers in the league, right? Even to this day, right? Antonio Brown, he asked me, who are you? Right. And this is that, when I'm already second year in the league, right? I've already been on the team. So I'm like, what is he talking? I'm playing for the Steelers. Like, what is he talking about? I sit next to him in the locker room, in the meeting rooms. So, but he was just, he sparked the idea of being more than an athlete. So that's pretty much what allowed me to really, once I, started to really understand my path outside of, once I had, the game had kind of passed me by, right? I don't even like to say I retired. But once that happened, I started to really try to peel back the layers of, what was it that allowed me to get to that level? And, the four main aspects or the four main principles that I pulled from it is, defining who you are, right? Like I said, at a young age, 5 years old, I knew I was going to be a professional athlete. I just wasn't sure which sport it was going to be in yet, right? But I still had to define, what it is I wanted to do, right, at a young age. And then, the I, standing for investing, right? Investing into yourself, whether that's academically. Like I shared a little bit earlier, I had to do a lot more investing academically after my sophomore year, because I failed off the basketball team, right? So that's another reason why basketball kind of got cut nationally, right? But, investing in yourself academically, investing into yourself, spiritually, investing into yourself, emotionally and physically, as far as training, that was what allowed me to really buckle down, right? In all those areas, especially at the high school level, and continue to ramp it up. at each and every single level that I went to after that. And then, adding value, right? Once I started to really figure out my strengths, being supportive of great causes, being very structured and disciplined, it was then, okay, who can I help, right? At each and every single level, whether it was helping Special Olympics at the high school level, or helping, different programs that I felt strongly about in the community. Whether it was joining up with different causes that I joined up with at the collegiate level and professional level.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always a way to, figuring out, okay, since I do have a platform, since I do have strengths, right, I do have some talents, where can I add value, right? So adding value with your strengths and talents for the V, and then executing, right? Finding a way to execute, whether that's through system, right? In our program, we believe in executing through systems, right? Or people, right? Processes or people. So those are the 4 different main aspects of the Dive Playbook. Like I said, it sprinkled a lot of stories, a lot of experiences, highs and lows, and just really just pouring into that student athlete that's at that, that teenager that might just, was just like me, wide-eyed, and might have everything in front of them and thinking that they're going to play that 13 or 14-year career, and just making sure that I can plant that seed in the fact that they really do have to understand who they are off the field, court, or ice, so that, when that transition happens, they're in a better space mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally than, a lot of athletes, and even at myself when I first transitioned. So that's pretty much the reasoning behind writing that book. And I'm glad I wrote the book. You know what I mean? I'm glad I was able to put that out. I've been getting some great traction, and it's led to a lot of opportunities, especially with high school student athletes. So I'm definitely grateful for it. And I'm just glad, like I said, God, put me in this position, and really reflecting on it, put me in this position to allow me to share my story. So to just help people go further than me in every area that they can.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it's this DIVE acronym that stands for these really 4 important pivotal things that you need to do. And I loved the investing in yourself, because I think the execution is really important too, but the investing is where people may not want to actually do that work. And that's where the kind of success is built, is in that investing. So like you said, whether it's academically or mental health or physical health, or just in your self-care, whatever that is, like if it is career development, like you need to invest that time. A lot of times it's time and not money. And that can be hard to navigate, especially when you're young and you just want to have fun, and you do have to invest some of that time. So I love that. And I think that's probably influenced a lot of people that have read the book to think differently, right? And hopefully they do. And I love that a lot. And you mentioned community work, and I want to talk a little bit about that too, because we've seen a lot of athletes start to get more involved about speaking out, speaking up in the community, and just really using their platforms to create impact. So I want to know, how can athletes start to do this? You talked about adding value, right? How can they start to do this? What examples, like how have you given back, or how do you, figure out where can I start? What can I do? How can I even feel empowered enough to do something, even if it's small? What would you say to someone that asks you that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think you have to start where what's most familiar with you. For myself, it's with athletes. That's where I feel as though I can make a connection. That's where I felt I always could make a connection with, even when it was in high school, right? Serving for Special Olympics, right? It was a way of using athletics to help, kids that might not have been as fortunate as me, physically, but it also, at the same time, as I felt as I was adding value and helping assist those kids, just like other athletes do at every level, I also was able to pull just a lot of a lot of their characteristics that I can use in my life, right? As far as it's persevering, really taking and seeing exactly what it is that, some of those kids or some people with some of those disabilities have to go through and sacrifice every day. It also was rewarding for me. But to get back to your question, I think you can start with what's most familiar with you, and start small, right? Even to this day, I still serve as a mentor for a nonprofit organization, a football camp called Stay Real Football Camp, right? And this is the football camp to where, even at the age around 13, 14, I got connected with a man by the name of Mark Newton. And Coach Newt, he asked me, he said, you want to be good, you want to be great, right? And after me saying great, not even necessarily knowing what the word meant, right? He took me down a path and exposed me. I'm big on exposure. He exposed me to a lot of different training, right? A lot of different training. And he got me in front of a lot of different college coaches and camps and national camps, and allowed me to compete at a high level. And so once that gave me that exposure, I always had in my mind to be able to one day, give back in some way to that, to that program. So to this day, right, I still, since COVID happened, I was doing a lot more mentorship, but a lot of the times I'm either serving as a mentor, or I'm going out on the field during the summer times twice a week, and just giving back, just like you said, giving back that time to kids that are local, that have the same dreams, right? That they want to go to the major schools. They want to play, the 10+ year career. And that's where I said, going back to that point of saying, okay, where can I make the most connection? Where am I most familiar? Right? It doesn't have to be, grandiose project, right? It could literally be you taking some of the kids from your neighborhood or some of the kids from your local town that have the same dreams, goals, aspirations as you, and are looking up to you to be able to show them, hey, what's the process? How did you do it? Just being available. Like I said, when COVID hit, it was just mentorship sessions, right? A lot of just me, sharing my story and having Q&As and just helping them through whether it was COVID or certain challenges that they had. But getting back to your point, I think it's just when you're trying to do community work, just do it, stick to something that's, most natural to you. Because then that's where people are going to realize it's authentic and it's coming from a good place. And again, it could be, you can start off small. But I think if everybody does their part, when it comes to community and it comes to, doing the things that you're passionate about and the people that you feel that you can connect and help, take you to a further level than you went to, I think is really important. And for me, it starts out in athletics, right? It starts out with student athletes. It starts out with, helping serve an organization that, provided a ton of value, a ton of structure, a ton of exposure to me. And that's why I feel as though I'm still going to, regardless of whether I'm in Delaware or a different state, I'm always going to be, serve as some part or some role in that organization that I talked about, Sabreville football camp. Because if it wasn't for that football camp, and if it wasn't for the people and the coaches and trainers that, helped me, and there was a lot of different trainers, a lot of different coaches that came through and helped me in that program. I'm not sure if I would have gotten the exposure that I was looking for. And I'm not sure if my career would have turned out the same way. So just being able to see that and being able to live that, it definitely always keeps me back into that heart, a service mentality and a service mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a powerful story. And thank you for sharing that, because your example is really a great place to start. What's authentic to you, what's familiar to you, and being able to start small and not feel the pressure of creating a foundation and doing something, huge and building something, right? Starting with what you know and what you're comfortable with. I think that's great advice. And what means something to you that you're actually going to be motivated to show up and do the work, because that's when it actually makes an impact. So I love that. I really appreciate it. And I know we're coming close to the end here, so I want to make sure we find out from you if people are interested in your support services at Value Solutions, if they want to get the Dive Playbook, if they just want to connect with you and talk a little bit more. Where can they find you? How can they reach you? And let us know if something's coming up for you that you want people to check out.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could definitely, to be able to book or be able to find, to be able to book my services, or even able to get a hold of the Dive Playbook, you can go to justinbrownvs.com. And then you could also be able to contact me, as we're already using this social media platform, through Instagram, justinbrown_VS. Same thing goes with my Twitter account, and then my Facebook and Instagram is just Justin Brown. So I'm very easy to get access to. And again, I always respond to any message or any questions, especially when it has to deal with student athletes.
Awesome. Well, Justin, thank you so much for taking the time to be here, taking a time out with us. This was a lot of fun to catch up. So glad that things are going well and you're doing so much to support athletes, and we really appreciate the work you're doing, and thanks for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be sure to send some links out with the website and where people can find you, and hope everybody does go follow you and reach out, because it's awesome what you're doing. So thanks again for being here.
No doubt. Thanks, Daniel. Thank you again for having me. It's good to catch up with you, too. Like I said, it's been a while, so I'm glad to see that everything's going well. I look forward to doing this again soon.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks again, Justin, and thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.